Hey, it's Zane here and welcome back. I want to thank you for tuning in again today. And if you're new here for the first time, a very special welcome to you. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and that just helps to get this content out to the algorithm, and of course encourages me to keep showing up and to sharing all that I know about Bitcoin and how it can make your life better. Now, in this video today, I want to talk about generational wealth. And I want to talk about why Bitcoin is the hardest form of money that can not only improve and elevate your financial future, but also it's an asset, it's a value system that you can pass on to your kids and hopefully the generations beyond that. And you know, this is something that's important to me at my stage in life. I'm 52. Starting to think about how I want retirement to look for me in, say, 10 years from now. That's kind of the goal that I have in mind. But also, you know, I've got three daughters in their 20s, and I know that before long in the future, I'm going to have another generation behind them. And I'm very aware of a lot of the problems going on in the financial system and the impact that's having on the next generation and the prospect of them ever being able to own their own home and to raise a family comfortably and to live pretty much a stress-free life and to build a prosperous future for themselves. And I know how tough that is for young people these days. And so that's probably at its core the main reason why I actually got involved in Bitcoin in the first place, because I really care about the next generation and the future that's in store for them. And so, you know, I've always considered myself a forward thinker and somebody who's trying to think outside the box. And, you know, Bitcoin just represented a monetary technology that was too good for me to ignore. And so I've poured a lot of time into studying it, learning about it, plugging my life into it, investing in it. And so really my purpose with this channel is just to really focus a lot on the mindset aspects of Bitcoin, because I believe, even after 7 years of being in Bitcoin myself, I believe that you never really know all that there is to learn about Bitcoin. I mean, I spend probably 2 to 3 hours a day tuning into different podcasts, interviews with other thought leaders in this space, reading books. And it just never ceases to blow my mind just how much there is actually to learn about Bitcoin and how many kind of rabbit holes that you can go down. But anyway, let's move on into today's video. So the first thing is that most people are actually blindly going through their life right now, not realizing the problem. And they're not realizing the problem, firstly, but secondly, they're not realizing that Bitcoin represents a solution to the problem. And the number one problem that we all face, or certainly 95% of the population faces, is this problem called inflation. And we have to understand that inflation is not a natural phenomenon. It's actually a man-made phenomenon. And, you know, despite what we hear in the mainstream news or, you know, from the government or from the Fed or the Reserve Bank, we have to understand that true inflation is not consumer price index inflation. It's not just the price of bread or milk or eggs going up by, you know, 50, 60, 70 cents or $1 year on year. Inflation is far more sinister than that. And the real inflation figure that you have to look at is what's known as the hurdle rate. It's CPI, so consumer price index inflation, plus monetary expansion. In other words, currency debasement, a fancy word for money printing. And since 1971, when President Nixon took America and inadvertently the rest of the free world off the gold standard, essentially we've all been operating under this floating fiat standard of currency, where governments and central banks around the world are essentially able to steal from the public by way of diluting their purchasing power through money printing. And, you know, for many years, and in fact probably 3-4 decades since 1971, we didn't really notice the situation or the problem that much. Maybe post GFC, we really started to notice it when they brought in and instituted this form of government spending known as QE, quantitative easing, became a very famous, a new term that was kind of used post GFC. And so, from there, we really started to really notice the growing wealth gap, the price of homes starting to really elevate. People sort of began to notice that their wages weren't keeping up with inflation. And maybe for, 10, 12 years, most people were able to kind of know that there was a problem, but just sort of get on with life and not really be too concerned about it. But then, of course, we had 2020. And when this health crisis came in, what did they do? They came to the party with the same form of stimulus, the same solution, and that was to create more currency. And so really this problem has been amplified to a whole new level since 2020. We are seeing now more than ever a cost of living crisis, a growing wealth gap. We're seeing that young people now are starting to really give up hope for the future, because without being able to save a deposit for a home, because the cost of living is so out of hand, what chances young people got of actually having money left over to save for a deposit? But not only that, they know that even if they do dig in for 5-10 years, to try and save a couple of $100 extra a week, them and their partner, by the time they get 5-10 years down the track, with the rate of house price growth, they know that there's no hope. There's just no chance that they'll be able to actually afford themselves being able to get onto the property ladder in a reasonable location. And so instead they just say, well, stuff the future, let's just focus on the present. And this really, I believe, is what strikes at the very heart of Bitcoin's value proposition. Because what Bitcoin says is, hey, I'm over here, I'm the world's first fixed, finite, truly scarce monetary technology, and I'm going to take care of your purchasing power, and not only am I going to protect and preserve it, but I'm actually going to grow it for you over time. And so my name's Bitcoin. What I don't want you to do is to go and put your cash in the bank and let it sit there for the next 5-10 years, thinking that when you get 5-10 years down the track, you're going to be able to purchase that thing that you want to buy. My name's Bitcoin. Come and take notice of me. What I'm actually going to do is ensure that in 5 to 10 years, what you put into me now is going to far exceed what you would otherwise have if you put that money into the bank. And so that's kind of, I guess, a cartoon-like analogy. Sorry about that. Analogy for what Bitcoin represents. And I know I'm kind of speaking to the younger people right now, but maybe you can relate to this. Maybe you know somebody who's in this boat. Maybe you know somebody who's been locked out of the housing market. And I think real estate, particularly in Australia, is a really good reference point, because Australians are genuinely addicted to real estate as a wealth creation tool. And so I like to pick on real estate a little bit. Full disclosure, I am a property investor and I do own real estate. But the reality is, the more time I spend in Bitcoin, the more I really question the validity of real estate moving forward, particularly given all of the rule changes that are taking place around real estate when it comes to rates being increased, again, without any consensus from the people. We just get these rates notices that are 50, 60, 70% higher year on year. Land tax, if you're a property investor, again, we have no say. They determine the value of the land, and then they issue you a land tax notice based on that. And so I don't believe that we actually ever truly really own real estate. And, I know people have become very wealthy out of real estate in this country, but the reality is Bitcoin is a far superior asset, because with Bitcoin, you don't just have a paper claim on it like you do with real estate. The rules can't be changed with Bitcoin. With real estate, they can. So effectively, you're only really leasing or renting that plot of land or that house or that apartment off the local council or the government for as long as you're towing the line, for as long as you're paying the land tax, the rates, on the Gold Coast now, there's a view a new view tax that's come in based on what level that your floor is on a beachside or a beachfront apartment. Just these crazy draconian taxes that are being brought in to ensure that real estate investors are topping up the coffers of the local governments, councils, etc. And so with Bitcoin, we don't have any of that. With Bitcoin, there is no holding costs, there is no lease fees, there is no maintenance costs, no property management fees, and there's no rates, there's no land tax, there's no insurance, there's none of that stuff that we actually have to worry about. And so when it comes to thinking in multi-generationally and thinking of how you want your wealth to look 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, these are really important properties for you to keep in mind when it comes to Bitcoin, because you can park your economic value in Bitcoin knowing that there's no counterparty or ulterior cost structures attached to owning that Bitcoin. It just sits there like granite, preserving value, growing over time because of its absolute scarcity and because of what's happening with adoption and demand around the world, and now nation states and now Wall Street all getting involved in Bitcoin. What's going to happen to the price and value proposition of Bitcoin over time? And so we come back to, why is Bitcoin the best place to store your economic value and energy? There's no getting away from the fact that over the past 7 years, Bitcoin's compound annual growth rate, CAGR, C-A-G-R, has done 59%. On average, every other asset combined has done just over 7%, somewhere between 7 and 8%. And so Bitcoin essentially has outperformed everything else to the tune of 8 to 9 times, 8 to 9x. And so what kind of investor would you be? What kind of person would you be who wants to make your life better in the future and create more wealth if you completely ignored Bitcoin? But the reality is that this is what's happening. This is what's happening in the financial planning industry. Nobody wants to talk about Bitcoin. And yet Bitcoin is sitting over here as a decentralized asset that is outperforming all the other financial products out there, including real estate. And so we have to think of Bitcoin as a separation of money from state. It is a way to escape the debt-based financial system. It is a way to protect and preserve and grow your financial value over time. Most people are going through their life right now not realizing that they're out at sea in a dinghy with a hole in it, and that their financial life is slowly sinking to the bottom. And this is what's happening. They can see that the cost of living is going up. They can see that their standard of living is gradually eroding. They're starting to question the feasibility of them being able to retire comfortably in the future. And there's a lot of people who haven't even had a good look at their superannuation or their 401k or their retirement account to actually see how it's performing. And that alone could be a significant wake-up call for you. And I guess in this country, one of the problems is that superannuation is kind of out of sight, out of mind for 30, 40 years of your working life. Unless you run a self-managed super fund, your employer, or maybe even you're self-employed and you just have a managed fund that you're allocating a certain amount of your weekly, fortnightly, monthly wages to into superannuation, but it's out of sight, out of mind. You're not paying any attention to it. And maybe once every decade, 20 years, you might revisit it and have a look at it. You're just assuming that managed fund where you're parking your retirement money is doing its job. But the reality is, if it's only doing 8, 9, 10% in a good year, you're far falling behind the true rate of inflation, which actually means that you're also out in that dinghy out at sea, and your financial future is slowly sinking to the bottom. And so when you take into account a compound annual growth rate of 59% compared to 8% for everything else over the past 7 years, we don't know what the future holds, but anytime you invest in anything be it superannuation, be it in property, be it in stocks and shares and bonds and all these kinds of things, the only thing you ever have to go by is historical data in order to determine whether it's a good place to park your economic value for the future. And so all I'm saying is that take a look at the performance of Bitcoin and its true value proposition because of its absolute scarcity. And what happens when you have something that is in limited supply and you have unlimited demand? The price of it can only go one way, and that is up. And that's what we're seeing with Bitcoin. And, you know, there are still people out there who think it's going to fail. Do you really think that Bitcoin would be going to fail if the US government comes out and announces a strategic Bitcoin reserve? I don't believe that Bitcoin is going to fail. You know, why would they issue an ETF, an exchange traded fund, so BlackRock, the largest financial manager on earth, could start buying it and hoarding Bitcoin so they could sell it to their financial planning clients? Why would they do that back in January of 2024? So, you know, I don't believe that Bitcoin can fail now. Maybe in the early years it could have, but certainly not now. And the longer that Bitcoin goes, the more secure and decentralized it becomes. And so, you know, we have a situation now where Bitcoin cannot be stopped. It's something that everybody's going to need, but the problem is it's still very few people really truly understand it. And so the reason for this channel is to help really simplify Bitcoin, to focus on a lot of the mindset aspects of Bitcoin and why it's so important to be thinking long term in terms of this asset, to not get shaken out of your position. I've met many people who are in Bitcoin over the years who are very smart people, some of them very wealthy, who have gotten into Bitcoin. You know, they've tripled, quadrupled their money and they've sold it. And there's two problems that come up when they do that. Number one is there's a capital gains tax problem, so you've got to pay tax on your gains. And number two is you'll never get the asset back, because if you're going to buy it back and it's, you know, quadrupled in price from when you bought it, what are the chances of you buying that asset back? And so now the price gets away even from people who are wealthy, because they feel like they're going to be paying overs for an asset that they bought, you know, when it was 20% of the current value that it is. And so Bitcoin is a mindset asset. It forces you to really think long term, to think very seriously before you sell it. People who truly understand Bitcoin and its value proposition, they will not be shaken out. You know, we Bitcoiners who are here for the long term, we understand that if we're going to sell the future for the present, there has to be a really, really good reason to do so, because once you let go of that Bitcoin, the chances of you getting that back, they're not great. They're not great. And you've got to deal with you know, the tax implications of doing that. And so there's a whole lot of other conversation, which I'll get to perhaps in another video, about what the future holds for Bitcoin in terms of you know, how you can have a lifestyle and preserve your Bitcoin without selling it. Because I know a lot of people think that the only way they're ever going to realize the gains and the value in Bitcoin is to actually eventually sell it. And maybe that's only one way. I'm not totally against it, but right now my mindset is all about how it is that I'm going to be able to leverage my Bitcoin to acquire other assets into the future. You know, because we have to understand that Bitcoin is granite. It's base layer technology. It is like buying a piece of the internet, the HTTPS protocol. If you can imagine back in, you know, 1998, 99, being able to actually buy a piece of the internet. And for every email that was downloaded, for every transaction that was done through an e-commerce store, through Amazon, etc., if you were to get a little piece, a few cents per download, per transaction, how wealthy would you be today? This is what you have to think of when it comes to Bitcoin and what you're actually owning, what you're actually buying into. And so I want to do a lot more videos on this and really focusing on the mindset, because I want you to be thinking that Bitcoin is the ultimate asset, it is the ultimate store of value. And if you truly honor your output, if you truly honor your skill set, your labor, everything that you put out into this world, the value you provide to humanity in order to generate the income that you generate, if you truly value that, you want to park that value in the most secure and best performing and the hardest form of money that humanity has ever seen. That's my take on it. I hope you agree with me. Please leave a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you got value today, please share with somebody else. Subscribe to my community if you haven't already. I read all the comments, so feel free to share with me and the rest of the community anything that is on your mind. But other than that, I want to thank you for tuning in today. Have a great day. This is Zane signing out. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.